We need to talk about these Epstein victims today, starting with the fact that whatever they said yesterday, it drove Nancy Mace into a full-blown panic attack. Because it members of the House Oversight Committee meeting yesterday behind closed doors with 6 of Epstein's victims, and Mace was spotted leaving early with tears streaming down her face. With her later saying on X, as a recent survivor, I had a very difficult time listening to their stories. Full-blown panic attack, sweating, hyperventilating, shaking, I can't breathe. With her adding, I feel the immense pain of how hard all victims are fighting for themselves because we know absolutely no one will fight for us. Right in her committee, they've been waiting for the DOJ to comply with its subpoena for the full Epstein files for weeks at this point. So far, they've only gotten 33,000 pages, which they just released to the public last night. But also a key thing there is that according to the Democrats on the committee, 97% of the documents were already publicly available. And in fact, according to reports, even some of those appear to be more heavily redacted now than they were when Attorney General Pam Bondi released them earlier this year. And then as far as the 3% that's new, reports say that it's mostly just logs of flight locations for Epstein's plane. Though we also got some more footage from the camera outside of Epstein's cell block the night that he died, which, according to Fox News, fills in the notorious missing minute just before midnight. Footage that also contradicts Bondi's previous claim that the same minute gets deleted every night during a reset. Though it's also unclear why she would lie about that, since it appears that the minute doesn't actually show anything notable anyway. Now, with all that said, according to a committee spokesperson, more files are supposed to be forthcoming from the DOJ, but critics have alleged that the White House is simply stalling to buy time. Or because Congress, they have to pass a funding bill by the end of this month to prevent a government shutdown. And so this whole Epstein files situation, it threatens to block that from happening. And so you have many suspecting that Trump's DOJ, they're trickling out information to make it seem like they're being transparent when they're really not. Which is then also why Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna have launched a full-scale pressure campaign against the White House and their fellow lawmakers to make sure that this issue doesn't disappear. Right? And they're seeking to pass what's called a discharge petition that would force the government to release the Epstein files. And apparently it's this close to happening. Because you have this pair announcing this morning that 212 Democrats and 4 Republicans have signed on, including Massie himself, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Meaning that as I'm recording this, only 2 more lawmakers in the House have to get on board and this thing would pass. So then after that, it would have to go through the Republican-controlled Senate and get signed by Donald Trump, which seems very unlikely. Especially as you had a White House official saying, quote, helping Thomas Massie and liberal Democrats with this would be viewed as a very hostile act to the administration. And actually, one of the arguments we're seeing here is that even if Donald Trump doesn't sign it, at least the entire country will see him not sign it. They will see him and each and every lawmaker who voted no. And their usual excuse that the petition, it doesn't protect the victims who are in the files, it could be a lot harder to rely on after today. Right in that, because this morning, Massie and Khanna brought a group of Epstein's victims, some of whom had never spoken out publicly before, to Capitol Hill to have their voices heard. And for an hour and a half, they unloaded years of anger, sadness, and frustration, and we saw the victim's lawyer going first.
All of the documents and evidence that we have worked so hard to gather hide behind protective orders, confidentiality agreements, and bank secrecy laws. That is why this discharge petition is so important. While we have seen the documents, you haven't. And when you see the documents, you're going to be appalled.
And as far as these women, you saw them stressing that this isn't about partisan politics.
Mr. President Donald J. Trump, I am a registered Republican, not that that matters because this is not political. However, I cordially invite you to the Capitol to meet me in person so you can understand this is not a hoax. We are real human beings.
Though also on the note of the president, you had one of the survivors making sure to make this comment.
Jeffrey and Ghislaine were always very boastful about their friends, their famous or powerful friends. And his biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the 2 of them.
And you had most of them talking about how releasing these files would not only show Americans the truth, but also it would help the victims heal their trauma.
The worst part is that the government is still in possession right now of the documents and information about that could help me remember and get over all of this maybe and help me heal. They have documents with my name on them that were confiscated from Jeffrey Epstein's house and could help me put the pieces of my own life back together. But I don't have any of it.
It's about the weight we live with daily. It is about the families broken and the future stolen. So I ask you, President Trump and members of Congress, why do we continue to cover up sexual abuse and assault? Who are we covering for?
You also had the late Virginia Giuffre's brother giving this incredibly emotional, impassioned plea to the government.
Whether you're a dad, a mom, a brother, or a sister, look your young ones in the face. Look them in the eye and tell them you didn't stand against the very people who raped, molested, and preyed upon children and young women. If you vote no, your stance will be clear. But here's my one ask. Look these survivors in the eye and tell them why.
Right, and you had several others echoing that demand as well.
It's time you do is right by us. Unseal all the documents. We are requesting transparency. And I am requesting every congressman and woman that goes against this bill be outed. I want to know.
And to be clear, the only motive for opposing this bill would be to conceal wrongdoing. You have a choice. Stand with the truth, or with the lies that have protected predators for decades.
But then also, in what may have been the biggest bombshell of the morning, one victim revealed that they have the Epstein client list. Not the actual list, if that even exists, but rather.
I would like to announce here today, us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know.
And then with all that, you had the lawyer adding,
When they reached a certain age, he did farm a section of them, some of them, out to some of his friends. That doesn't mean all of his friends. And we've talked to them about the various people that they were farmed out to. So we've created somewhat of a list. Most of these individuals, the victims, are very scared to say these names because they could get sued, they're going to get attacked, and nobody protected them the first time.
And then finally, you had Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, I mean, her involvement here is massive. She seems MAGA through and through. She always seems like the president's biggest cheerleader, though she's standing against him in this. And she closed out the event saying,
yeah, it's a scary thing to name names, but I will tell you, I'm not afraid to name names. And so if they want to give me a list, I will walk in that Capitol on the House floor and I'll say every damn name that abused these women.
But, we'll have to see if that pressure's enough to make any Republicans buckle, because remember, they only need 2 more to sign the petition. And today you had Representative Victoria Spartz, who attended the conference, telling reporters she's still deciding whether to do it or not. Right, and this also is House Speaker Mike Johnson, who said he's too busy to even attend this morning's conference, reiterating his opposition to the petition, saying it does not adequately protect victims. And because we have so much compassion for the victims, those who spoke today, and the estimated maybe as many as 1,000 victims total, we have to be very diligent about protecting their identities. And according to The Hill, he gathered GOP leadership in the basement of the Capitol for a closed-door meeting today and implored them not to sign the petition. And then, separate from that, you had Donald Trump being asked for his reaction to everything that's happened, and he said this.
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. You know, it reminds me a little of the Kennedy situation. We gave him everything over and over again, more and more and more. And nobody's ever satisfied. I understand that we were subpoenaed to give files, and I understand we've given thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having.
And so then someone went back to Mike Johnson and asked, hey, do you agree with Trump that this is a hoax? And we saw...
I'm not sure what that comment refers to, but I've spoken to the president myself about this many times, and he is as insistent as we are. He is the most transparent president in memory, probably in the history of the country. As you know, he stops. If he were here now, he would stand here and take your questions endlessly. Now, he also, just as we do, is insistent that we protect the innocent victims, and that's what this has been about.
But of course, you have critics countering that Trump and the DOJ, they're not actually protecting the victims. They're protecting their reputations. And you had Massey making that argument today, pointing to a flight log release last night in which all the names are redacted, which is then why he says that Johnson is naive to think they can trust the White House to release all the files, and they instead need to be forced to do so. As we wait to see how this plays out, you have Trump deflecting and dodging. I'd really love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions to what we're seeing today. Because whether it be with this first big story or anything else that stands out to you today, I'd love to hear from you. Yes, this is a news show, but it's also a conversation.